He walked into that boutique as the most dangerous man in Seoul, composed, untouchable, and completely prepared to buy a ring for a woman he didn't love. He walked out as something far more terrifying than a crime lord, a father who didn't know he had children, and a husband who never stopped being one. If you're new here, like this video and subscribe before you keep watching, because this story gets darker, messier, and more satisfying with every chapter, and you do not want the algorithm hiding the ending from you. Trust me, hit that button first. Then we begin. The thing about powerful men is that they always believe they are the ones doing the watching. Kang Min-sok had built 48 years of evidence to support this belief. He had watched rivals crumble, watched empires consolidate, watched entire families rearrange themselves when his car pulled into a street. In boardrooms, in back rooms, in rooms that didn't officially exist, people watched him walk in and immediately began calculating the fastest exit. He was not a man who got surprised. Surprise was a luxury reserved for people who hadn't thought far enough ahead, and Min-sok had always thought far enough ahead. Which made what happened on a Thursday afternoon in a Gangnam jewelry boutique either the universe's greatest joke or its most long overdue invoice. He had arrived at 2:47 p.m. He knew the exact time because his head of security, Park Dong-hyun, had confirmed the appointment window twice and reminded him, with the careful tone of a man who'd rather be elsewhere, that the boutique had been privately reserved. No other customers. No press. No complications. The engagement ring was supposed to take 10 minutes. He didn't need romance for the selection. He needed precision. The ring would be presented to Han Ji-yeon, daughter of Chairman Han Sung-woo of the Han Group, one of Korea's most architecturally powerful families. The union had been discussed for 3 months by people other than Min-sok and Ji-yeon themselves, which said everything necessary about the nature of the arrangement. It wasn't cold, exactly. It was efficient, a merger with better table manners. Min-sok had told himself he was fine with this. He had been telling himself a lot of things for 15 years. The boutique was the kind of establishment that didn't need a sign outside. If you didn't already know it existed, you weren't supposed to be there. Crystal cases. Soft lighting engineered to make every stone look like a small captive star. A smell of something expensive and deliberately unnamed. The manager materialized at the door with the expression of a man who had been rehearsing his greeting since morning. Min-sok handed his coat to Dong-hyun without looking, scanned the room with the automatic threat assessment that never fully switched off, and began moving toward the central display case. He made it 4 steps, then he stopped. In the far corner of the boutique, the section that had not been included in the reservation apparently because someone in logistics had made a very significant error, stood a woman. Her back was partially turned. She was crouching slightly, adjusting the collar of a small jacket on a boy who clearly had objections to having his collar adjusted. Next to the boy stood a girl, arms folded, waiting with the infinite patience of someone who had spent her entire short life watching her brother resist basic cooperation. Min-sok registered the woman first the way you register a sound before you identify it. Something in the body responding before the mind catches up. The posture. The particular angle of her shoulders. The way she moved her hands with precise, unhurried confidence, even while dealing with a small person who was actively making her task more difficult. His next breath didn't come as expected. The woman straightened up, laughing quietly at something the boy said, and turned just enough. Min-sok's entire nervous system made a decision without consulting him. He knew that profile. He had memorized that profile 10 years ago in an apartment kitchen over a bowl of objectively terrible homemade jjigae while she told him she didn't want his money. He had tried, for 15 years, to unmemorize it. He had failed, quietly, consistently, and alone. Zara. The name arrived in his chest before it reached his mouth. She hadn't seen him yet. She was back to adjusting the boy's jacket, and the boy was back to his personal mission of making that as difficult as possible. The girl had wandered 1 step to the left and was studying a display case with an expression of assessment that looked unsettlingly familiar. Min-sok took 1 slow step forward, and then the boy turned. Children, in Min-sok's limited experience of them, were largely interchangeable background figures. He had never paid them particular attention. He had never had reason to. He had reason now. The boy's eyes found him across the showroom with the calm, unhurried focus of someone who had been expecting this moment and had prepared for it thoroughly. Those eyes. Min-sok had seen those eyes every morning for 48 years. He was looking at them now in the face of an 8-year-old boy in a slightly crooked collar, and every single calculation that had ever organized his life dissolved simultaneously, like a spreadsheet dropped into open water. The boy looked at Zara, then back at Min-sok. Then, in a voice of extraordinary composure for someone who hadn't yet lost his baby teeth, said, "Mom, is that him?" Zara turned, and the fear that crossed her face, not surprise, not confusion, not the softness of recognition, but pure, immediate, protective fear, hit Kang Min-sok somewhere beneath his ribs with the force of something he had no name for. The ring in the display case behind him cost $400,000. He had already completely forgotten it existed. The shadow chairman had walked in to buy an engagement ring. He had found something that made the ring irrelevant. The only question now was what he intended to do about it, and whether after 15 years of choosing power over everything else, he had anything left worth offering. Before we go further, June found his father on purpose. An 8-year-old engineered this entire moment while his mother thought they were just visiting Seoul. Do you think Zara was wrong to keep the twins from Min-sok, or did she make the only choice she could to protect them? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you believe children deserve to know both parents, no matter how complicated the truth is, hit subscribe. Because only people who think secrets like this are okay won't. The boutique had the particular silence of a room where everyone present understood something significant was happening and had collectively decided that breathing loudly was a poor career choice. The two employees near the central display case had achieved a remarkable stillness. The manager, who had spent 20 years perfecting his professional composure, was currently failing at it completely. Dong Hyun, standing near the entrance with Min-sok's coat folded over one arm, had the expression of a man mentally drafting his resignation letter in real time. Nobody moved. Nobody, that is, except Zara. She moved immediately, one smooth, instinctive step backward, both hands finding the twins' shoulders and drawing them gently behind her. The gesture was so practiced, so reflexively protective, that it clearly wasn't the first time she had positioned herself between her children and something uncertain. It was muscle memory. It was a mother's entire operating system condensed into a single motion. And it carved something open in Min-sok's chest that he hadn't known was still capable of being carved. Zara. His voice came out lower than intended, not commanding. Not the voice that moved boardrooms or ended arguments before they started. Something older. Something that had apparently survived 15 years of deliberate burial without anyone's permission. She lifted her chin. The fear on her face hadn't disappeared. It had reorganized itself into something more controlled, the way she had always processed difficult things. He remembered that about her. She never fell apart publicly. She simply compressed and dealt and fell apart later in private where nobody could use it against her. Min-sok. His name in her mouth after 10 years landed like a stone dropped from a significant height. The boy, June, though Min-sok didn't know that yet, was still watching him with that unnerving steadiness. He hadn't retreated behind Zara. He had allowed himself to be guided there and then quietly stepped back to her side, which was a technical compliance with his mother's instinct and a complete philosophical rejection of it. He stood at her elbow and watched Min-sok with the focused patience of someone running calculations. The girl, Seo-yeon, had taken her brother's hand. She was watching Min-sok too, but differently. Where June assessed, she observed. Her expression wasn't cold. It was careful, and careful was somehow more unnerving. Min-sok looked at them both for a long moment. He was not a man who needed things explained twice. He had built his entire career on reading rooms, reading people, reading the unspoken architecture of situations before anyone else noticed the walls. What he was reading now, the bone structure, the eyes, the particular quiet intensity radiating off the boy like a small, concentrated weather system, required no explanation at all. He knew. He had known from the moment June turned around. The question was what to do with what he knew, and he was discovering, to his significant discomfort, that his usual toolkit of responses, cold logic, measured calculation, strategic patience, had all apparently taken the afternoon off. "How old are they?" he asked. Zara's jaw tightened. "Min-sok, how old, Zara?" The quiet in his voice was not a soft thing. It was the particular quiet of a man who had asked a simple question and already knew the answer was going to rearrange every fixed point in his life. She held his gaze. 8. The number settled into the room. 8 years old. Zara had disappeared 10 years ago. He did the arithmetic that he absolutely did not want to do and arrived at the answer he absolutely did not want to have. June chose this precise moment to tilt his head slightly and say, with the conversational calm of someone discussing weather patterns, "You're taller than your photographs." Min-sok stared at him. "He researches things," Seo-yeon offered, in the tone of a sister who had been providing this explanation for years and found it only partially adequate. "I'm thorough," June clarified without apology. Min-sok looked at his son, the word arriving in his mind without announcement, without ceremony, simply landing and refusing to leave, and felt something shift beneath the foundation of every choice he had made for the last decade. Not crumbling. Something more structural than that. Something like the moment before a building doesn't fall but understands for the first time that it could. He turned to Zara. "We need to talk." She crossed her arms. "Here?" He glanced at the frozen staff, the velvet display cases, and Dong-hyun, who was now staring very intently at a spot on the ceiling. "No, not here." "Then we don't talk today." "Zara," I said, she repeated with the specific precision of a woman who had spent years rehearsing exactly this boundary. "Not today." June looked between them. "She means she needs time to prepare her argument," he told Min-sok helpfully. "She did the same thing before my school enrollment dispute. She won that one." Zara closed her eyes briefly. Min-sok almost smiled. Almost. They met the following evening. Zara had chosen the location herself, which Min-sok respected and also understood was entirely intentional. A quiet restaurant in Itaewon, public enough that he couldn't make it a confrontation, small enough that his security team would be visible and therefore manageable. She had picked a corner table with clear sightlines to both exits. He noticed this immediately and said nothing about it because it told him everything he needed to know about how she had spent the last 10 years. Not carelessly, not softly, with the precise, exhausting vigilance of someone who had never fully stopped looking over her shoulder. The twins were with her sister, Hyunji. Min-sok arrived 3 minutes early. Zara arrived exactly on time, which had always been her particular form of punctuality, not early enough to seem eager, not late enough to seem disorganized. She sat down across from him, placed her bag on the chair beside her with the practiced ease of a woman settling into a difficult meeting she had already won in her head, and looked at him. She had aged the way certain people aged, not diminished, but deepened. The kind of beautiful that stops performing and simply exists. It was profoundly inconvenient. "You look well," he said. "Don't do that," she replied. "Do what?" "Start politely. We both know this isn't polite." She folded her hands on the table. "Ask what you came to ask." He studied her for a moment. This, too, was familiar. Zara had never allowed him the luxury of a gradual approach. She went straight to the center of things with the precision of someone who found circling a waste of good oxygen. "Were you ever going to tell me?" The question landed between them like something heavy set down carefully. She didn't flinch. She had clearly prepared for this, just as June had predicted. "I thought about it," she said. "In the beginning, constantly, then less. Then I thought about it every time June did something that looked exactly like you, which is," she paused, "unfortunately frequent." "That's not an answer." "No," she agreed. "It isn't." She looked at the table for a moment, then back at him. "I made a decision based on the information I had. I had just been threatened by people inside your organization, people you trusted. I was pregnant and alone, and the safest version of my children's lives was one that didn't include being leverage." Min-sok was quiet. "You want to tell me I was wrong," she said. "I want to tell you that I would have protected them." "You couldn't protect me," she said, not unkindly. "And I was an adult who chose to be there. They didn't get a choice, so I made it for them." The logic was airtight. He hated how airtight it was. He had spent his entire career constructing airtight logic and deploying it against people who couldn't find the gaps, and now it was being used on him with his own architectural precision, and he had absolutely no counter-argument that didn't sound like ego dressed up as principle. He picked up his water glass and set it down again. "June knew who I was." "June knows everything," Zara said, with the exhausted affection of a woman who had spent 8 years being outwitted by someone who still needed help tying his left shoe. "I don't know how. I was careful. He is apparently more careful. He gets that from me. I am aware of that. It keeps me up at night." Something almost human moved across Min-sok's expression. He controlled it quickly, but not before Zara noticed, because she noticed everything. She always had. It was one of the original problems. "What do you want?" she asked. Not hostile, genuine. The question of a woman who had survived too much to waste time pretending the answer was obvious. He thought about the ring sitting in a box in Dong-hyun's jacket pocket. He had brought it out of habit, or absurdity, or some combination of the two that he hadn't fully examined yet. "I want to know them," he said. Zara was still. "I'm not asking to disrupt what you've built. I'm not making threats. I'm not negotiating." He looked at her directly. "I'm asking. For the first time in my life, I am sitting across from someone and simply asking." The silence stretched. Outside, Seoul moved in its noisy, indifferent way. Zara looked at him for a long time, the way she used to look at him in their kitchen, measuring the distance between what he said and what he meant. "June will have questions," she said finally, "detailed ones, with follow-ups." I would expect nothing less. Seo-yeon will watch you for weeks before she decides anything. That's fair, she exhaled. Long, slow. 10 years compressed into a single breath released across a restaurant table. 1 hour, she said. Saturday. The park near Hyunji's apartment. Public. My terms. He nodded once, and Min Sok. Her eyes didn't waver. If you treat this like a business arrangement, I will disappear again. And next time, not even June will find you a trail to follow. He believed her completely. Saturday, he said. Saturday arrived with the particular indifference of Seoul in autumn. Crisp air, pale sky, leaves making their annual dramatic exit from trees that seemed genuinely surprised every year. The park near Hyunji's apartment was the kind of place that existed in every city. Slightly worn benches, a small fountain that worked intermittently, children occupying every surface not claimed by a pigeon. Min Sok arrived in a car that cost more than most apartments in the neighborhood and immediately recognized this was a mistake. He told Dong-hyun to park 2 streets away. Dong-hyun did not ask questions anymore. He had stopped asking questions approximately 48 hours ago and had developed in their place a permanent expression of a man processing ongoing astonishment. Min Sok walked to the park alone. He was wearing, at his assistant's careful suggestion, nothing with a visible logo. He looked like a wealthy man attempting to look like a regular man, which produced the specific result of looking like a wealthy man who had recently lost a bet. He was aware of this. He accepted it. He sat on a bench near the fountain and waited. Zara arrived 7 minutes later with the twins. June spotted him first, naturally. The boy walked with the measured pace of someone who had planned the route in advance and was simply executing it. Seo-yeon walked beside her mother, one hand loosely in Zara's, her eyes already doing their slow, systematic scan of the park. She found Min Sok, noted him, and returned her gaze forward without any visible reaction. It was the most efficiently devastating assessment he had ever received from someone wearing light-up sneakers. Zara sat on the bench beside him with careful distance between them. The twins stood. June, because he was apparently constitutionally incapable of being indirect, spoke first. You run the Kang Group, he said. Officially, it's logistics and real estate. Unofficially. June, Zara said. I'm establishing context. You're 8. That's not a counter-argument. Min Sok looked at his son. You're correct about the Kang Group, he said carefully. What else did you find? June studied him. You were going to buy an engagement ring. Yes. For Han Ji-yeon. The name in the boy's mouth was so precisely pronounced that Min Sok briefly entertained the alarming possibility that June had a dossier. Yes, he said again. Are you still? The question was asked with complete neutrality, which was somehow more pointed than any accusation. Min Sok considered several answers and discarded all of them before arriving at the only one that was actually true. I don't know yet. June appeared to accept this as an honest response, which it was, and moved on. Why didn't you look harder for our mother? The question detonated quietly. Zara made a small sound but didn't intervene. She had warned Min Sok. She had said detailed questions with follow-ups, and he had nodded as though he understood, which it turned out he had not, fully, until this precise moment. I searched for months, Min Sok said. Not long enough. June, Zara began. He can answer, June said. Not rudely. With the calm insistence of someone who had waited 8 years for a conversation and intended to have it properly. Min Sok leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and looked at his son directly. You're right, he said. Not long enough. I told myself she had chosen to leave. It was easier than accepting that I had built a life she needed to escape from. Silence. Even the fountain chose this moment to malfunction, producing one indignant gurgle and going quiet. June considered this for approximately 4 seconds. That was an honest answer, he said, in the tone of someone updating a mental document. Seo-yeon, who had spent this entire exchange standing slightly to the left and saying nothing, chose this moment to sit down on the bench, not beside her mother, on Min Sok's other side, with approximately 6 inches of space between them. She opened the small bag she was carrying, removed a container of shelled sunflower seeds, and began feeding the pigeons with complete focus, as though she had not just made a profound social declaration. Min Sok looked at the top of her head. Something in his throat tightened unexpectedly. Zara was watching Seo-yeon with an expression he couldn't fully read, part surprise, part resignation, part something that might have been hope if she was willing to call it that, which she wasn't, yet. She decides fast, Min Sok said quietly. She decided 2 days ago, Zara replied. She just needed to confirm in person. June sat down on the bench on Zara's other side, which placed Min Sok, Zara, and both children in a row, an arrangement so geometrically, accidentally family-shaped that two passing grandmothers smiled at them warmly. Minsok stared at the fountain. 48 years old, shadow chairman, a man whose name traveled quietly and carried consequences, completely undone by pigeons and sunflower seeds. "Can you come back next Saturday?" Seoyeon asked without looking up from the birds. He couldn't speak for a moment. "Yes," he managed. She nodded once, satisfied, and offered a seed to a particularly bold pigeon who had absolutely no respect for personal space. June pulled a small notebook from his jacket, an actual physical notebook which tracked perfectly, and uncapped a pen. "I have 14 more questions," he said. "We can start now or next week. Your preference." Zara pressed 2 fingers to her temple. Minsok looked sideways at his son and felt, for the first time in 15 years, something dangerously close to joy. "Start now," he said. The 14 questions took 3 Saturdays. This was not because Minsok was evasive. It was because June's questions had sub-questions, and the sub-questions had clauses, and the clauses occasionally required June to consult the notebook for reference material he had prepared in advance. By the 3rd Saturday, Minsok had begun bringing a second coffee for himself because he had learned, empirically, that June's interrogations required sustained cognitive energy. Zara watched all of this with the expression of a woman who had spent 8 years being the sole target of that notebook and was experiencing something between sympathy and quiet vindication. The Saturdays became a structure, then a habit, then something none of them named out loud because naming it felt like touching a soap bubble, possible, but at significant risk. Minsok learned things. Seoyeon was quietly ferocious about injustice. She had once organized a formal complaint against her school cafeteria for discontinuing a specific brand of yogurt, complete with a petition signed by 43 students. She had won. She mentioned this to Minsok not as a boast but as context, in the same tone someone might explain a professional credential. He had nodded seriously and thought, she gets that from her mother. June was building something on his laptop that he described only as a project, and deflected all further inquiry with the smoothness of a man 3 times his age. Minsok did not push. He recognized the behavior. He had invented it. He also learned that Zara had built a consulting firm in Toronto, legitimate, successful, entirely her own. She had 3 full-time employees and a client list she didn't discuss in specifics, which he respected. She had constructed an entire life from the wreckage of the one she'd left, and it was good. It was genuinely, solidly good. And this fact produced in Minsok a complicated mixture of pride and grief that he had no clean category for. He was careful. He showed up exactly when he said he would. He left exactly when the hour ended, in the beginning. Though the hours had quietly expanded without formal negotiation, the way territory sometimes shifts not through conflict, but through the simple persistence of presence. He did not mention Jiyeon. Jiyeon, however, was not waiting quietly. The call came on a Wednesday evening, 3 weeks into the Saturdays. Not from Jiyeon herself, she was too strategic for direct confrontation, but from her father, Chairman Han, whose voice on the phone had the particular texture of a man accustomed to outcomes arriving prearranged. "The announcement has been delayed long enough," Han said. "People are noticing." "People notice everything," Minsok said. "That's never been a reason to act prematurely." Minsok. A pause waited with implication. "Is there something I should know about?" The question sat in the air between them like smoke. Minsok thought about a park bench, about sunflower seeds and 14 questions, and a small girl who had decided something in 2 days that he was still working out how to deserve. "No," he said. "I'll be in touch." He ended the call. He sat in his office on the 14th floor of the Kang Group building, city spread below him like an enormous lit circuit board, and thought about the ring still sitting in Donghyun's jacket pocket because neither of them had addressed it, and they had both, by unspoken agreement, decided that not addressing it was the current strategy. He thought about what Zara had said in the restaurant. "If you treat this like a business arrangement, I will disappear again." He thought about Jiyeon, who deserved honesty she hadn't received yet. He thought about June's question on the 3rd Saturday, asked at the end, almost casually, the way the most important questions always arrived. "Do you regret it? All of it?" Minsok had looked at him. "Which part?" "The part where you chose the empire over everything else." The park had been quiet. Seoyeon had been drawing something in a small sketchbook. Zara had been looking at the fountain, pretending not to listen with the focused intensity of someone listening extremely carefully. "Every day," Minsok had said. June had written something in his notebook. Minsok had not asked what. He called Jiyeon the following morning. She answered on the 2nd ring, which meant she had been expecting the call, which meant she already knew something, which meant the Han family's intelligence network was functioning exactly as designed. "Ji-yeon," he said, "I need to meet with you and your father. There are things I should have said before now." A pause. Precise and controlled. "I see." "It isn't," he started. "Min-sok." Her voice was even, not wounded, calibrated. "I had a feeling this arrangement had a complication. I simply waited to see if you would be honest about it." He was quiet. "I appreciate that you called," she said. "Come Thursday." She ended the call. Min-sok set the phone down and looked at the ring box on his desk. Dong-hyun had finally, diplomatically, placed it there 2 days ago as a form of silent administrative pressure. He picked it up, turned it over once, set it back down. Then he called Dong-hyun. "Clear Thursday morning, and find out if there's a good children's science museum near Itaewon. June mentioned something about aerospace engineering last week and I want to follow up." Dong-hyun was silent for 3 full seconds. "Sir, the ring is not the priority." Another silence. "Understood." A pause that contained an entire paragraph of unspoken commentary. "The Science Museum opens at 10. Book it." He ended the call and looked out at Seoul. Somewhere across this city, a boy with 14 questions and a notebook was building something on a laptop he wouldn't explain. A girl was drawing in a sketchbook and making decisions at a speed that embarrassed most adults. And a woman who had once handed him back his own business card like it personally offended her was sitting inside a life she had built from scratch, waiting to see if he was finally, after all this time, worth the complicated truth of letting back in. He intended to be. The meeting with Chairman Han and Ji-yeon took place in the Han family's private dining room. A room designed, Min-sok had always thought, specifically to make guests feel the weight of every decision made within it. Dark wood, tall windows, the kind of silence that had been architecturally engineered rather than naturally occurring. A room that had witnessed mergers, ultimatums, and the quiet dismantling of at least 2 political careers over tea. Today, it would witness something it almost certainly had not been designed for: an honest conversation. Chairman Han sat at the head of the table with the composed authority of a man who had been disappointing people on his own terms for 6 decades and found it efficient. Ji-yeon sat to his right, back straight, hands folded, dressed in a way that communicated she had taken this meeting seriously without communicating that it had cost her anything. She was, Min-sok thought, genuinely impressive. She had always been impressive. The problem was never Ji-yeon. The problem was that impressive had never been the same thing as necessary. Min-sok sat across from them and did not wait for tea. "I owe you both honesty that I should have offered before this arrangement progressed," he said. "I'm going to provide it now because you deserve it, and because anything less would be a poor foundation for a decision of this magnitude." Chairman Han's eyes sharpened. Ji-yeon remained precisely still. 3 weeks ago I encountered someone from my past," Min-sok continued. "Someone I was married to privately 10 years ago. We parted under circumstances I believed, incorrectly, were straightforward. They were not. She has 2 children." He paused. "My children. Twins. 8 years old." The room absorbed this. Chairman Han set down his teacup with a care that suggested he was managing a significant internal response. Ji-yeon's expression did not collapse or fracture. It simply recalibrated, the way a precise instrument adjusts to new data. It was almost admirable. "I see," Chairman Han said, in the tone of a man who was seeing several things simultaneously, none of them convenient. "I'm not here to negotiate," Min-sok said. "I'm here to withdraw from the arrangement with respect and without maneuvering. Ji-yeon deserves a partnership built on genuine intention. I cannot offer that, not honestly." Ji-yeon looked at him for a long moment. "How long have you known about the children?" 3 weeks. "And in 3 weeks you decided the arrangement was incompatible." "In 3 weeks I sat in a park with my daughter while she fed pigeons and my son interviewed me with a notebook," Min-sok said. "Yes, I decided." Something moved briefly across Ji-yeon's composed expression. Not quite a smile. The suggestion of one, in the way a room holds the shape of furniture that has been moved. "I told my father 2 weeks ago that I believed there was a complication," she said. "I also told him I thought you would handle it directly rather than diplomatically." She tilted her head slightly. "I was correct." Chairman Han looked at his daughter, then at Min-sok. He exhaled through his nose with the slow, controlled release of a man recalculating several months of planning. "The business implications. We can discuss those separately," Min-sok said. "On their own terms without this arrangement attached. The Kang Group's relationship with Han Group doesn't require a marriage to function. It requires mutual interest, which still exists." Chairman Han was quiet for a moment. Then, with the pragmatic grace of a man who had not survived 6 decades of Korean business by being inflexible, "Fine," he stood. "I need air." He walked to the window and stood with his back to them, which was his version of giving them privacy, which was unexpectedly decent of him. Jian looked at Min Sok directly. "Is she worth it?" The question was not cruel. It was the sincere inquiry of a woman who had nearly married a man she didn't love and wanted to understand if the reason was proportionate to the disruption. "My children are worth it," Min Sok said. "Their mother," he stopped, considered. "She is the only person who ever handed me back my own business card." Jian blinked. "I don't know what that means." "It means she treated me like an ordinary man when nobody else did, including myself." He paused. "It turns out I needed that more than I needed an empire." Jian was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up her tea. "Tell your son that if he ever wants an internship at Han Group in about 15 years, he should apply directly to me." A measured pause. "From what you've described, I suspect he'll be overqualified." Min Sok almost smiled. "He'll probably try to acquire you. Then I'll look forward to the negotiation." She set down the cup. "Go, Min Sok. Go be whatever it is you're trying to become." He stood, bowed with genuine respect, walked out of the room that had been designed to hold the weight of important decisions. He had just made the most important one of his life in it. Outside, Dong Hyun was waiting. He took one look at Min Sok's face. "The ring, sir?" "Return it." Dong Hyun nodded with the restrained relief of a man who had been quietly hoping for this outcome for 3 weeks. "The Science Museum confirmed for Saturday." "Good." Min Sok buttoned his jacket. "And Dong Hyun?" "Sir?" "Find me a restaurant in Itaewon, the kind that doesn't require a reservation. Somewhere a person could order badly made jjigae without it being an event." Dong Hyun stared at him. "You want bad jjigae?" "I want ordinary," Min Sok said simply. "I've had enough of remarkable." He walked out into the cold Seoul afternoon. For the first time in 15 years, he had absolutely no idea what happened next. He found, to his considerable surprise, that this felt nothing like weakness. It felt like the first honest thing he had done in a decade. The Science Museum was everything June had been promised and everything So-yeon had not expected to love as much as she did. June moved through the aerospace exhibit with the focused intensity of a pilgrim arriving at a significant landmark, reading every panel, asking the staff questions that visibly delighted some of them and mildly alarmed others. He had brought the notebook. Of course he had brought the notebook. Min Sok walked beside him through the exhibit and answered what he could, admitted what he couldn't, and twice pulled up information on his phone to verify June's corrections, which were accurate both times. Seo-yeon had attached herself to the geology section with zero prior warning and absolute conviction, pressing her nose to a case containing a meteorite fragment with the reverence most people reserved for sacred objects. She informed Min Sok that rocks that had traveled through space deserved more respect than they typically received. He agreed completely. She seemed satisfied with this position. Zara walked slightly behind all 3 of them, watching. She had spent 8 years watching her children with the complete, exhausting attention of a woman who was both their parent and their entire support system. But today she was watching something different. She was watching her children with their father, the strange, careful, entirely uncharted geography of it. June explaining things to Min Sok with the authority of a small professor. Seo-yeon tugging Min Sok's sleeve when she found something significant, which was frequent. Min Sok crouching to her level each time without hesitation, without checking his watch, without the distracted half-presence of a man whose mind was elsewhere. His mind was not elsewhere. That was the thing Zara hadn't fully prepared for. She had prepared for awkward, for stilted, for the performance of effort from a man who was fundamentally more comfortable commanding rooms than occupying them. She had not prepared for genuine. She had not prepared for Min Sok sitting cross-legged on the museum floor next to Seo-yeon while she explained, at length, the difference between meteors and meteorites, listening with the complete focused attention he had once given only to boardrooms and threats. It was deeply inconvenient. They ate lunch at a cafe near the museum, not the kind of establishment Min Sok typically occupied, which meant the chairs were slightly uncomfortable and the menu was laminated and the jjigae was, Zara noted privately, not much better than hers had ever been. She mentioned this. Min Sok looked at his bowl and said, "It's perfect," with complete sincerity, and she looked at him for a moment longer than she intended to. June was on question 22 by dessert. He had abandoned the notebook in favor of direct conversation, which everyone at the table recognized as a significant developmental milestone without saying so. Seo Yan was drawing in her sketchbook. She had been drawing Min-sok intermittently all day with the focused efficiency of an artist completing a study, and had not shown him any of them, which he had the wisdom not to request. After lunch, while June was occupied at a gift shop debating the merits of two different books with the focus of a doctoral candidate, Zara and Min-sok stood near the entrance in the particular quiet of two people who have run out of logistics to discuss and arrived at the thing underneath. "He's happy," Zara said, not accusatory, observational. "So is she." Min-sok watched Seo Yan through the gift shop window, still sketching. "You built that. The happiness, that was entirely you." Zara was quiet for a moment. "Don't make me the hero of your guilt, Min-sok. It doesn't fit either of us." "I'm not." He turned to look at her. "I'm telling you that I see what you did, what it cost. I'm not rewriting it into something convenient for myself." A pause. "I spent 15 years being the most powerful version of the wrong man. I'd like to try something different." She looked at him. The same look from the kitchen 10 years ago, measuring the distance between what he said and what he meant, running her particular calibration. "That's not a small thing you're asking. I know. The children are not negotiating chips. They are not a path back to me. They are people. I know that too. And I am not the woman who disappeared," she said steadily. "I rebuilt. I have a life, a business, a city I chose. I don't need rescuing and I don't need completing. I'm not offering rescue." His voice was quiet, stripped of every layer of performance he had spent decades perfecting. "I'm offering presence, consistently, imperfectly, without an agenda." He paused. "I'm asking if there is any version of a future where that is worth something to you." The museum doors opened, and a group of schoolchildren flooded past them in a cheerful, chaotic wave, completely indifferent to the fact that two people were standing in their path having the most important conversation of their lives. Zara watched the children pass. Then she looked at Min-sok. Really looked the way she had in Chicago over a business card, measuring not his power or his wealth, but the specific quality of the man underneath all of it, the one she had found once and spent a decade trying not to miss. "There's a gallery opening in Itaewon next Friday," she said. "Seo Yan wants to go. She would tolerate your company." Something shifted in Min-sok's face. Slow. Fundamental. Like a building that had been braced against weather for so long it had forgotten what stillness felt like. "And her mother." Zara picked up her bag. "Her mother," she said carefully, with the particular precision of a woman choosing each word like she was placing stones across water, "would also tolerate your company, under evaluation, with full veto rights retained." "Understood." "And Min-sok." She looked at him one final time before turning toward the gift shop. "If you show up with a ring before we've had at least 12 normal conversations, I will return it myself. Personally. With a speech." He almost smiled. Then he did smile. Fully. Without managing it or containing it, the same unguarded thing that had happened in a Chicago hotel 15 years ago when a woman in a burgundy dress handed him back his own business card. 12 conversations, he said. "I can do that." Inside the gift shop, June had apparently resolved his book debate and was now explaining his selection rationale to a mildly overwhelmed cashier. Seo Yan closed her sketchbook, walked to the entrance, and stopped in front of Min-sok. She looked up at him with her careful, assessing eyes. Then she held out the sketchbook. He took it, opened it. She had drawn all 4 of them, at the museum, at lunch, near the fountain from the very first Saturday. Small, precise drawings, each one capturing something true. In the last drawing, they were sitting on the bench in the park, a row of 4, pigeons at their feet. Underneath it, in careful handwriting, "Us." Min-sok stood in the entrance of a children's science museum in Seoul, holding a sketchbook, and felt 15 years of carefully maintained invulnerability dissolve so completely and so finally that he didn't even try to recover it. He didn't need it anymore. "Thank you, Seo Yan," he said. She took the sketchbook back, tucked it under her arm, and walked toward her mother with the satisfied air of someone who had completed an important task. June emerged from the gift shop with 2 books and a receipt he had clearly examined for accuracy. He looked between his parents, and they were finally, undeniably, both his parents, standing in the same place, oriented toward the same future, and made a small note in his notebook. Min-sok looked at him. "What did you write?" June capped the pen. "Day 1, he said simply. And Kang Min-sok, shadow chairman, most feared man in Seoul, empire builder, and the last person anyone who knew him would have predicted to be standing in a museum gift shop doorway with his entire chest cracked open by a child's sketchbook, nodded once. "Day 1, he agreed. The shadow chairman walked into that boutique to buy a ring for a merger. He walked out with something no empire could manufacture, a beginning he actually deserved. If you believe that the people who walk away from power to choose presence are the strongest ones in the room, like this, subscribe, and share this story. Because the people who won't are the same ones who would have told Minseok to sign that engagement contract and forget the park bench ever happened, and we both know those people are wrong.